Chapter 11, Somewhere in Atlanta. Ryder woke up and assessed the situation. He kept his eyes closed but squinted just enough to see if there was anyone in the room. When he was sure he was alone, he opened his eyes all the way. He was strapped to the cot with the chain still attached to his arms and legs, which were now cutting into his wrists. He tried to move them a little just to take the pressure off the areas, but it just added to the pain. His whole body ached now. He knew about the weapon that they used against him. Centuries ago, it was called a taser, but scientists perfected a new one that not only causes a disruption in all the electronic impulses in the body, it also causes excruciating pain that can last for hours or days. Ryan experienced one at low levels during some training a few years back. It felt like they gave him more than the low-level dose, though. Well, clearly I learned his lesson about speaking the truth, Ryan thought. I better watch myself in the future, or next time I might not wake up from it. Talbot came in to check his vitals. Ryder decided to make a new attempt at reconciliation and get Samuels back to the table. Dr. Talbot, can you please let Samuels know that I'm sorry for my outburst and I would like to learn more from him? I might be willing to reconsider with more knowledge. Ryder tried to give a pathetic look of hope to the man. Talbot finished the examination, looked Ryder in the eyes for a moment, and went out the door. This left Ryder time to contemplate the fact that he had to go to the bathroom and didn't know when Talbot would come back again. He closed his eyes and tried to think of something else. He remembered a happy thought. More than 35 years earlier, Captain Ryder arrived at his small home on the moon base, greeted by his little Sarah alive and well. From a very young age, she figured out how to maneuver in an environment. She used the walls and objects to jump from her crib to his arms. Ryder grabbed her and held her close. His wife Helen came in as well. He remembered how beautiful she was back then. Well, Trevor, she did it again. She figured out how to open the crib and climb out. Ryder looked in pride at his daughter. Sarah, you are amazing. You are going to be famous someday, I will bet, because you can escape anything we use to keep you in your crib. Don't predict her future too soon, Helen said, scolding him. But then he fast-forwarded his memories to the fights with Helen. He was gone all the time on missions without being able to contact her. Sarah was growing up with a father who only existed once a month when he wasn't out fixing the world's problems. Nevertheless, every time he saw Sarah, she would look at him with such love. She grew up so fast, and soon she had her own family. She wanted Ryder to join them on the Voyager to go to Sperrier. Regrettably, he couldn't join them because his responsibilities were too important. If only he were there on Voyager when the space debris hit, maybe he could have done or said something, but now Sarah was lost to him forever. Ryder heard the door open again, and his thoughts returned to his present predicament. It was Talbot. He released Ryder from the binds and helped him sit up. Our father would like to talk to you again. Please go to the bathroom and get yourself to the table, Talbot ordered. Ryder pulled himself up. He strained to lift the chains still attached to his wrists and ankles. He wondered if they were watching him through the cameras even now as he sat on the toilet. He finished, washed his hands, and then made his way to the table. He sat down, feeling the weight of his 67 years. If only I retired years ago, he thought, then I could be relaxing somewhere nice, maybe with a view of the stars. He wondered how Cooper was doing. Bolts will keep him safe, he hoped. Then Samuels entered again and sat. Now, I would like to try this again. Do you think you can keep yourself in control, Trevor? Ryder was too tired to be angry, so he just nodded and said, Yes, Samuels, I am in control. Good, Samuels said, and his smile returned to his face. Ryder decided to try and get Samuels talking about himself. It was always a good tactic to get the person reminiscing to buy yourself time. So, Sebastian, how have you always been with the EOA? Now, that is an interesting question, Trevor, and yes, feel free to call me Sebastian. We have known each other long enough to be on a first-name basis. Well, it seems like I can't remember a time when I wasn't. You see, my father was also quite religious. He was one of the first leaders in this movement. I am sure you have seen it grow over the years with so many strong men and women sharing the sign of our organization. While my father wanted me to follow in his footsteps as a minister, I chose a different path, as you know, by joining the military. After completing my service, I was interested in becoming a politician. While my father was opposed at first, he realized it would give me an inside track with the World Space Congress, which was gaining more power in the world. However, I had to be careful to keep my views more neutral while in politics. I would have never been elected if I told them my father was in the EOA. Those years were tough, as I was trying to live two separate lives. While my son became a well-known local politician as well, I decided it was time to make my permanent move to the EOA and devote my life to the cause as my father had. It was then that I came up with a brilliant plan that would make me look like a hero and allow me to disappear as well. Do you remember how I died? Ryder thought for a moment. It was many years ago, but he still remembered some of the details. I believe that you were on one of the new space stations when it happened. Something about a gas leak? Yes, yes, Sebastian got excited. You do remember. I was there christening another one of those damn space stations, he frowned. More opportunities for men to leave Earth and violate God's laws. Anyway, one of my associates sabotaged the space station so that a malfunction caused a valve to overheat and explode, which made the life support systems fail. All of the crew and guests on the ship were trying to escape to the pod. I valiantly helped three of the reporters to the escape pod while sacrificing my spot. As the escape pod left the space station, they saw a big explosion and what looked like my body being jettisoned to the planet below. In fact, one of my compatriots whisked me away safely in a second escape pod, even before the explosion occurred. Here is the irony of the whole situation. They actually renamed the space station after me. That, of course, led to the government putting my son into my spot on the World Space Congress and granting him all my years of service as well. This enabled him to gain a lot of seniority and eventually become the vice chairman of the World Congress. Sebastian looked to Trevor, apparently waiting for some praise. That is an amazing story, Sebastian. I applaud your ingenuity in making this all work. Inside, though, Ryder was sick to his stomach. All of this helped to clarify how the EOA was so successful throughout the years. He was correct. They had an inside man all along, which was why he would go on missions only to find the EOA already cleared out. With the vice chairman of the World Congress being the son of the leader of the EOA, all information was free flowing to them, even the most confidential information about ongoing missions. Thank you, Trevor. I worked hard to make it happen, but when God is on your side, you can do anything. Sebastian said this while staring wide-eyed up at the cross that was hanging on the wall. Trevor took a moment to look back at it as well. He wondered why he hadn't noticed it before. The crucifix was of a simple design, but what made Trevor look twice at it was the sharpness of the bottom end. He might just have found his weapon for escape. Now, wouldn't that be ironic? Ryder thought. Changing the subject just a little, Trevor asked. So I noticed that the other soldiers call you my father. Can you tell me about that? Of course, Trevor, leaning in closely and whispering, Sebastian said. You see, when the space station accident occurred, many of the current followers and future followers thought I perished in the event. When I returned to the EOA base, I was met with looks of disbelief because everyone thought I was dead. But there I was, in the flesh. Many of them considered it a miracle. It was as if I rose from the dead. So from then on, they called me my father, or the father. At first I tried to deny it, but their faith was too strong, and I even started to believe that it was a miracle. Sebastian leaned back, grinning widely. An amazing turn of events for you. I can see now that I didn't have much chance against you, Trevor said, continuing to try and make Samuels feel more comfortable and to keep him talking. Trevor knew this was important for two reasons. One being that as long as Samuels was happy, Trevor would live. And two, when Trevor eventually escaped or was rescued, he needed all the information he could get. I have a question, though. You mentioned that you tried to have the raiders kill me in New Denver. How did you even know I was there? Trevor asked, really wanting to know. Oh, Trevor, you haven't figured it out yet? Sebastian said, hesitating a moment to see if he would guess. Let me give you a hint. Didn't you always wonder why you were there by yourself? I mean, the raiders are truly dangerous. Wouldn't it be better if there was a team to help you like you had before? Ryder thought about this for a minute. Suddenly, it all hit him like a brick. Maybe it was the drugs that dulled his senses earlier, but it all led back to Commander Smith. Smith, the one who sent him on the mission to New Denver alone, the man who couldn't provide backup when they were going into the CNN center, yet wanted to know exactly where they were going and when. My God, Commander Smith works for you? First of all, watch your language, Trevor, Sebastian scolded, and Trevor nodded in apology. And second, you are exactly right. Smith works for the EOA, and he has for some time now. He thought sending you to New Denver alone would be a suicide mission. Many of the raiders, you see, work for me as well. Doesn't it seem logical? They are trying to make things worse in all the cities all across the world. We provide them food, and they wreak havoc. When they were getting ready to attack you, Cooper and his dad messed up the situation by exposing them inadvertently. So you were able to kill two of their leaders in the street while trying to save Mitch. This made their attack on the library a weak one. Sebastian shook his head in disgust. It seems when I let others do my work for me, it does not work out. But in the end, it worked out for the best, because I got to see you again, and now you are sitting with me instead of being dead. Trevor tried to maintain a neutral face, but his mind was reeling. They have been after me all the way back to New Denver, and the raiders work for the EOA. Is there anything the EOA doesn't control? Ryder wondered. Ryder just hoped that the rest of his team figured out about Commander Smith as well, and didn't go back to the base. Forcing himself back into the conversation, Ryder focused on Sebastian. I need to work on strengthening this relationship with Sebastian so I can learn all I can about his organization, Ryder thought. Do you mind if I ask you a question, Sebastian? I don't want to offend, but just understand you better, Trevor asked, treading lightly into some of the controversial topics. This is where I will gain the most intel, if he is willing, Trevor thought. Please, Trevor, we are friends. Ask me anything, Sebastian said, smiling while pushing a plate of food over to him. Trevor knew that there would be some things he could ask which would send Sebastian into a rage again, so he needed to be careful. Trevor started slowly. So earlier we talked a little bit about what my man found on the terminal about the final solution. I would like to learn more about this. Sebastian winced again, but not as pronounced as the first time Trevor brought it up. His smile did fade, though. Again, I do not wish they had called it that. He took a deep breath. Trevor, it is time for another story, so you can truly understand the magnitude of my dedication. Ryder bowed his head, took a drink of water, bit into an apple, and acquiesced to Samuel's. You see, I am a man of the Bible. It gives me so much happiness and helps me be grounded during the tough times. The Bible makes it very clear that man should be on earth, not in space. My father believed that as long as we stayed in the solar system, we were fulfilling God's plan. But I disagreed, and we fought a lot about this. It is why there were times when the EOA was reduced to just a minor organization and things continued the course. Sebastian frowned and continued. My father let men spread across the solar system to the moon, Mars, and some asteroids. It was only inevitable that once given into the temptation of space, there would be men who would want to go to other stars as well. This was my father's mistake. He let them move off Earth. That never should have happened. We worked in the World Space Congress to keep the space budgets low so that it was only a matter of time for people to give up. But my father gave them an inch, and they went for a mile. As he said this, Sebastian slammed his fist on the table. Can I ask you, though, why you are so sure that man shouldn't be in the stars? Trevor queried, hoping to turn the conversation back to a more calm subject. His plan succeeded, as Sebastian relaxed his fist and looked directly at Trevor with a smile. Of course, Trevor. That is an easy one. It is because the Bible tells us so. Trevor frowned a little. I don't remember the Bible saying we shouldn't explore space. Sebastian said, let me give you a few examples. In Psalm 115-16, it says, "The heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he has given to the children of man." In Genesis 1:28, he says, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have domain over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Sebastian made sure to emphasize the earth every time he said it. Sebastian rattled off a few more quotes before he stopped and looked directly at Trevor. "You see, God was telling us that we are in charge of everything around us and above us, but only on the earth. The heavens and space are reserved for God, and God alone. It is an abomination for us to leave this earth and travel to other worlds." Sebastian paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. Trevor decided to debate his points just a little. "So what were we supposed to do when the earth rejected us? When God ravaged the lands with famine, tornadoes, hurricanes, pandemics, and extreme climate changes? Were we just supposed to die out? Or was this his sign that it was time to look to space?" Ah, yes, Trevor, the classic atheist view of the world. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. The problem with your logic is that you assume that life will be easy. If it isn't, you assume we must go somewhere else. This is wrong. God has been testing us. He isn't going to make it so that we can just live in Eden. We must fight to dominate the earth, not to be ruled by it. As he said in Isaiah 58:11, "And the Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your desire in scorched places and make your bones strong, and you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water, whose waters do not fail." But don't you think God might be referring to the scorched places like Mars or the moon? Maybe God meant that even in those places the waters would not fail. Trevor asked. "An interesting interpretation, but clearly from someone who knows little of God," Sebastian concluded. "Well, if you knew my background, Sebastian, you would know that I was raised Catholic, and I was confirmed in my teens before going to basic. So again, your logic might be flawed." Trevor was pushing this a little, and he worried about the reaction, but he continued, "What if you are misinterpreting God's writings? What if the Genesis quote meant that we should be fruitful and multiply everywhere? What if he wanted us to propagate more than Earth? What if he wanted us to cover the entire universe? We know that he wanted us to have many children. For example, in Psalm 127, he said, 'Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of a womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them.' Maybe he wanted us to spread our children over all the universe." Now it was Trevor's turn to get angry. Here was a man who interpreted the Bible for his own pleasure and didn't consider other beliefs. His beliefs killed many people, including Trevor's own daughter. Trevor thought, "This man is evil, and so is his warped religion." "Careful, Trevor," Sebastian warned. "I don't want to ask my men to come in and give you another electric shock." "You are just not correct." Sebastian shook his head vehemently. "As God said in Genesis 1:29, 'Look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant on the surface of the entire earth, and every tree whose fruit contains seed. This food will be for you.'" Trevor took a few deep breaths to try and relax himself. He needed to stay rational. This wasn't the first time he was captured by an enemy, but something was different this time. He knew they were giving him some kind of drugs. Maybe that was why he was having difficulty with self-control. I apologize, Sebastian. I don't seem to be myself at the moment." "That's all right, Trevor. Learning is hard, and accepting a new way to look at life isn't the easiest thing to do. But I have converted other men like you, and in the end, they saw the light and are now part of the EOA. Someday soon, I hope to have you on my team as well." Looking at Sebastian, Trevor now realized the reason for all this. Sebastian hoped to convert him to his army. Obviously, this was never going to happen, but Trevor needed to keep the appearance that he was considering it, or else Sebastian would just kill him and move on. "So, Sebastian, this takes us back to my original question. Does the final solution involve stopping everyone in space?" Sebastian didn't wince this time, but answered the question. Yes, of course, Trevor. It is going to be spectacular. Not like that failed attempt by Ryan on the supply ship on the moon base. It is going to end all travel everywhere, and people will return to Earth in droves, ready to accept God and the EOA as their spiritual leaders. Trevor tried to avoid looking too surprised or fearful in his expression, but inside he was in turmoil. Cooper was on Gemini right now. What if this final solution involved attacking Gemini? He needed to get word to his grandson and fast. Trevor opened his mouth to ask another question, but Sebastian raised his hand to stop him. I am sorry, Trevor, but we must have to continue this conversation a little later. I must go and check on some of the plans. You see, you arrived at a time when the final solution is almost upon us, and there is a lot to review and approve. I will meet with you tomorrow, maybe. For now, please finish this tray of food, and here is a copy of the Bible for you to read. Please pay close attention to the passages I marked in it. It is time for you to learn and convert. I have big plans for you. As he said this, Sebastian touched Trevor's hands and then got up and walked to the door. Trevor tried to hold in the revulsion he was feeling at this moment, which was extremely difficult. He knew they must be watching him now, so he must appear interested in being converted. He opened the Bible and began reading while eating some of the fruit on the plate. I need to be as strong as possible for when I make my move, thought Trevor. Chapter 11, Part 2, Outside of the USS Gemini. Come on, Richardson, it's time to see what you can do behind the wheel, Johnson said, grabbing his hand and dragging him toward the terminal. These past few days were a blur. Cooper was learning so much about the inner and outer workings of so many spaceships. Johnson was an amazing teacher. It was hard to believe she was only a couple of years older than him. She seemed to have a wealth of knowledge about every spaceship out here. Maybe it was because her grandfather was First Sergeant Bolts, Cooper thought. That would definitely give her a huge advantage. Where are we going? Cooper asked as he was dragged through the corridor, not really caring where he was going if it was with her. We are going for a little trip, Johnson said, looking back with that coy smile. They entered the terminal and Johnson kicked off the wall as they were now outside of the artificial gravity influence. He could do nothing but follow as she had a strong grip on his arm. They reached the other side and he noticed on the airlock that it said Motor Pool Cruiser Number 3. When they got close to the door, she released him and he swung around, putting his feet against the wall, flipping around so he was facing the airlock next to her. She opened the keypad and used her card to unlock the airlock and it slid open slowly. I thought it'd be a good idea to show you around the graveyard this morning. Don't worry, the ship is fully supplied with meals because we probably won't make it back in time for dinner. Okay, Cooper said, so what is the graveyard? You will just have to see it to understand. She motioned for him to enter the ship. Cooper used the handholds to pull himself into the small round ship. Johnson came in behind him and closed the airlock. Then she took a spot at the helm, motioning for Cooper to take the seat next to her. She used the handholds to deftly maneuver into the seat next to her. He noticed there were a full set of controls in front of him as well. Good, she said. Now, I know that you have driven the moon rovers before, but now it's time to learn to fly a small ship. This is MP number 3. It is assigned to the astromechanical engineering team. Since there are only a few of us on Gemini, we can use it often. She walked him through some basic instructions and showed him where the ship's navigation controls were. It was actually quite a bit like the rover, which surprised him. These controls look a lot like the rover I used in BASIC, he said aloud. Yes, that is because they are manufactured by the same company. The company decided to design the user interface to be the same. There are actually some moon rovers that can fly as well, so they had to make the controls similar for cross-training purposes. The most important difference is that instead of maneuvering over a two-dimensional plane like the moon, you will be moving in 3 dimensions. So you will have to know what is going on all around you. This system here helps, she said, pointing to a hologram that hovered just below the windows, looking out to space, as it will show you all the controls in 3 dimensions. You can even control it with your hands, like this. As she said it, she grabbed the cube-shaped holograph with 2 hands and turned it to face the other way. Then she spread her arms apart and the cube grew much larger, showing more objects in space. The most important thing is that you make sure you turn on this beacon," she said, while clicking a red button on the console. "This will send out a signal constantly notifying everyone around of your position so they don't run into us. We also have a simple artificial intelligence system that will perform evasive maneuvers if it feels the ship is in danger of crashing into something." "Now, take us out," Johnson ordered. "And don't worry, I'm here on the controls as well and will take over if needed." Cooper nodded and took the controls. The small ship had a wheel with two hand grips, traditionally called a yoke. Pulling back on the yoke would adjust the up and down orientation, and going left and right would turn the ship. He needed to pull back on the yoke until it was at a 0-degree orientation, both up and down and left and right, before he started, or they would take off and immediately be turning, which would make for an uncomfortable ride. Cooper knew all of this because his homework last night was to read up on all the systems, and Johnson reviewed them as well when they first got into the ship. On the yoke was a small button which controlled the thrust. With the orientation correct, he tapped the button once and felt the movement start forward. He tapped it a few more times and they were moving forward a little faster. "Well done, Richardson. We are now in motion. Now, let's see what you can do with a little bit of speed." She gave him a sly smile, reached over and tapped the thruster 10 times in quick succession. Suddenly, they were both thrown back in their seats and they were moving forward with a strong velocity. Cooper, caught off guard, recovered quickly and was in control. However, up ahead was a ship just floating there in space. Cooper turned the wheel to avoid it, but overturned and they were thrown to the left side of the seats. He then turned the other way to get back on track, again overcompensating. He was panicking a little. Then another ship appeared in the window, then two more. There was nowhere to go. He held the button slowly, slowing the acceleration, but they still had momentum in this frictionless open space. "Johnson, how do I turn on the reverse thrusters?" Cooper asked, avoiding another ship. "Richardson," Johnson instructed. "Cooper, look at me. You didn't listen to what I was saying in the beginning. The ship will protect you from collision. Watch." Then Johnson took control with her yoke and turned it so they could head directly for one of the ships. But, Cooper was trying to make the yoke turn, but he didn't have control. Their ship was headed right for the derelict ship floating there in space. As they got closer, Cooper squinted his eyes and held on tight to the yoke. Then, just before they were going to collide, he heard alerts in the system. Moments later, the ship turned slowly away from the collision. The yoke was still facing straight at the ship, but the bearing changed and they were past the ship and safe. The alarms turned off and they were back to normal. Cooper let go of the yoke for a moment and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Johnson tapped another button to reduce the velocity and then turned the ship 90 degrees and slowed it almost to a stop. What Cooper saw through the window blew his mind. There in front of him were more ships than he could count. They were all in various states of disrepair. He focused on one of them and noticed a cable running from it to what looked like a small satellite. Then he noticed many others attached to the same satellite. Quietly, Cooper asked, "What is this place?" "Cooper, I hope you don't mind if I call you by your first name." "Welcome to the graveyard," Johnson said, waving her arm as if to reveal the prize. "This is amazing, but I can't believe so many ships are not being used," Cooper said without taking his eyes off them. "Well, many of them have problems that are beyond repair. For example, a massive breach in the hull. If it is too big, it can never be repaired well enough to fly effectively in space again. Others require parts that are just not made anymore or use propulsion systems that aren't efficient. So we bring those ships here. Then, when we need parts for working ships, we can come to retrieve them. Out here at the L2 Lagrange point, there isn't much gravity to cause these ships to disappear, but they do have to stay in position, so we use a small satellite in the middle that we make small movements to the location of the ships to keep them in a stable position. Right now, we have over 40 ships abandoned here in the yard." "Johnson, this place is incredible," Cooper said, looking over to her. "I know. This is my favorite place." "You know what? You can call me Anne when we're not around others," Johnson said, looking at him. Then she changed the subject. "So, tell me about yourself, Cooper. I understand that Major Ryder is your grandfather." Turning from the graveyard, Cooper responded, "Yes, I didn't find that out until after I graduated from basic training. He is my mom's father." So I heard. I still can't believe your mom was Sarah Richardson. Do you know that she is one of my greatest idols? She is one of the reasons I went to astromechanical engineering. Me too, said Cooper, smiling. Then, on a more serious note, but I wish I could remember her. I was so young when she died. Yes, saving the Voyager, that was a terrible moment in history for astronauts. I am surprised that program didn't end right then, Anne said. So, you grew up on Earth? Anne asked. Yes. After leaving Voyager, my dad took me to Earth where I grew up in New Denver, but I hated being trapped in those hallways underground. I needed to get out. What did you do? I would go topside to find adventure, Cooper said excitedly, remembering his fun and sometimes frightening experiences back on Earth. Wow, I heard stories about the freelancers on Earth. Did you do that? Anne said, impressed by the new knowledge. Yeah, while most kids of my age were focusing on school and video games, I was on the surface trying to find treasures to sell for food and other things. I bet you have some great stories to tell. I have never been to Earth, Anne said. Really? Cooper said, genuinely surprised. Yeah, my life has always been on Gemini. Do you mean you've never left Gemini? Cooper asked. I left a few times to go to the moon for training and a few vacations, but yeah, Gemini is my life, she said, leaning back in her seat and looking out on the sea of ships again. So, Anne, Cooper said, using her first name gingerly, tell me about you. Is First Sergeant Bolts really your grandfather? Yes, he is. So, is his last name Johnson then? Cooper asked, hoping to figure out what Bolt's real last name was. Oh, no. I have my mother's married name. You see, my parents got a divorce when I was really young, and my mother just kept the last name. Grandfather was fine with it. He actually thought it would be better that way. He didn't want me to have to live up to his legacy, and having the Bolt's name would have made it harder. Has that happened to you since you are the son of the great Sarah Richardson? Actually, no, not really. In fact, it wasn't until a few months ago that I even knew who my mom was. What the heck? Anne said, looking at him directly. Well, Cooper didn't know how much he should tell Anne about his previous life. He didn't want to start crying in front of her. He still struggled at night sometimes thinking about his dad and the death, but time was healing the wounds, and he was learning so much that he didn't think about it as much. Go on, it's okay, Anne said, grabbing his shoulder for a moment. Well, my dad took me to New Denver. He started working in the burn pit, recycling the trash from the city. Wait, wasn't he the project manager on Voyager? Yeah, Cooper nodded. But I guess when he watched my mom die outside the Voyager, he couldn't take it anymore and quit the program. But what do you mean you didn't know who your mom was? Well, he didn't tell me growing up that we used to work in space. All he told me was that mom died when I was young. Geez, so all this time you didn't know you were born in space? You didn't know your mom was a famous astronaut? Anne said, looking at him in horror. Yeah, Cooper said, looking down. Dad decided it was best to let me choose my own path. He encouraged my interest, which turned out to be going on adventures topside and finding different machines to fix. For example, I found a radio and a digital clock in the rubble of Denver and got them working again. Yes, it's obvious from your work already that you are talented with fixing things, Anne said, complimenting him. Cooper blushed and mumbled a thank you. Then, changing the subject, he said, but then one time when I was topside, I met Ryder. He was there to stop the raiders. Who are the raiders? Anne asked. Well, they were a group of criminals who were killing freelancers. I guess they were topside, and many attacked the underground cities. You might equate them to the space pirates out here. Yes, I understand, nodded Anne. So then Ryder told you about your mom? Yes, he told me a little bit about it and said that I should come to space and go to basic training. Wow, you were recruited by a legend. I mean, Sarah is famous, but Ryder is almost like God out here. When there's a problem that needs to be solved, people say, what would Ryder do? Every day I learn more and more about my grandfather, Cooper said, shaking his head. Yup, so then you just left with Ryder? Well, no, I went back and confronted my dad, and he told me all about my mom and about living in space. At first I was mad, but then I understood better why he kept it from me. I don't know. He was really hurt by Mom's death. I was just shocked to find out about all this. I mean, my dad had this box hidden under his bed the entire time. We shared a room growing up. If only I had looked in it, I would have known the truth. That is messed up, Anne said. So, did your dad come back to space with you? Cooper knew this would come up in the conversation, but he didn't really want to talk about it. He took a deep breath and tried to keep his feelings in check. He was supposed to, but when we were going to meet Ryder, we were attacked by the raiders. My dad sacrificed himself so I could make it to Ryder safely. Oh my God, Anne said in shock. She reached over and held Cooper's hand. Yeah, Ryder came to try and rescue my dad, but it was too late. I did get to see my dad one more time, and he told me how proud he was of me. It has been hard, but I've been working through it, Cooper said, looking up to her with his eyes watering. Well, I hope Raider made him pay, she said with fire in her eyes. Cooper collected himself a little and gripped Anne's hand harder. Yes, he actually did. He shot a bunch of them out there in the street. Then, as we were leaving on the ship, the raiders attacked his apartment, and he blew up the whole building. Damn! It sounds like he really made them pay, Anne said, trying to lighten the moment. Hell yes, Cooper said, finally recovering a little. Well, Cooper, that was quite a story. I had no idea. And then after basic, Ryder and I spent some time together, and he told me he was my grandfather. It is great to know that I still have some family left, but I would like to see him more, Cooper said, using his hand to wipe his eyes. He was better now and happy that Anne knew the truth about his background. Anne clutched his hand one more time and let him go. So, what was the coolest thing you ever found freelancing? Anne said, trying to change the subject to something less emotional. Cooper told her the story about how he found the knives and the attack of the rats. That is crazy, was all Anne could say when he finished. I hope I can hear more of your stories in the future. Then she said, well, I guess it's time to get back to work. She clicked on the computer screen and brought up a schematic of the graveyard. Remember that ship we are working on? Well, it needs some parts we don't have in stock for the engine. But luckily, I remembered we do have an old Chinese ship out here from about 10 years back. It was towed in to us from Mars after the life support systems failed. The Chinese government decided to abandon the ship, so it came to us. Moving the holograph screen around, she focused on the one ship she wanted. Now, now that we have a target in sight, we can have the AI take us there. She clicked a button and the shuttle moved forward toward the ship. The rest of the day and into the evening they worked getting the parts they needed, and Cooper didn't make it back to his room until well after midnight. But as he lay there in bed, he couldn't help but think about Anne. No female had ever grabbed his hand before. He hoped that it might turn into something more than just a friendship, but for now, it was nice to know that he could talk to a woman without stammering over his words.